Hello, and welcome to Dungeon Masters Mojo. This is the channel where I'd like to talk about the things that happen in the DM's mind during gameplay. Because no matter how much setup we do ahead of time, the players or the interactions will always have something change. And it's up to us to adapt with them. And that's why I called this channel Dungeon Masters Mojo. Mojo is known as a type of magic. Well, if you're the Dungeon Master, you've got all the magic in the world at your disposal. So go ahead and use some of that magic to change things up, to roll with events that the players come up with. It'll make your game funner for you and for your players. So put a little bit of mojo in everything you do. So how do I use this mojo, you might ask? Well, it happens at the table during play. When the characters decide they're going to do something that I didn't exactly have planned for, or a combat is going the wrong way. And that could be for the players or against the players. The DM has to be able to adapt to any situation that they come up with. And if you've been DMing long enough, you understand that players can come up with anything in the world, most of the time things that you haven't thought of. But that's where your mojo comes in. Use your creativity, your knowledge, your experience, improv, insight, or a manual, a book, to come up with something to change it up enough that your players are still having fun and you are having fun too as the DM. Because this is a game that we all play together, the players and the DM. We're not against each other. The players are there to have fun and the DM is there to have fun. Let's have a cooperative experience and enjoy it. And your mojo plays a big part of that. So let's talk about a time where I had to use some of my mojo. And this goes back about 5 years when I had 2 players in a campaign that were trying to bring a dormant god back to exalted status. To do this, they needed followers. And to get followers, they headed to what they knew of as the nearest town. And along their way, they had an encounter that we're going to call Minotaurs on the Bridge. The 2 players are a ranger and a druid, and they come upon the Minotaur and they see him from a good distance away. So they decide to hide in the bushes nearby and see what's going on. And they watch as he looks both directions across the bridge, seeing if, they're thinking if traffic is coming or not. And they also notice that he's talking to someone underneath the bridge. So they assume there's at least one other Minotaur or some other creature down below the bridge. And in the DM's mind, I've had this set up for just a small combat encounter for the characters to get used to some combat. They were fairly inexperienced. And also it would get me more into the mode of combat also, because you never know when you're going to need it. This was supposed to be just a one and done throwaway encounter and move on to the next part of the story. But what happened kind of changed things up a little bit. The characters decided that they were going to ambush the Minotaur from distance with their bows, which, being a ranger and a druid, they both had that ability, and they could do some pretty decent damage before the Minotaur got to them. They wanted to draw out who was underneath the bridge, and then make a decision from there on whether or not they should run or continue the encounter. So I had made the Minotaurs weaker. They were less hit points, and they did less damage than a normal Minotaur, just to lighten it up a little bit. And that was the thinking in my mind. Well, what happened next is what sometimes happens at your table is when the DM changes things instantly on the fly. As the characters made their attacks, the Minotaur bellowed out in pain and then started striding forward, and he called out in a language that the characters didn't understand underneath the bridge. So after the first round of combat, they both hit successfully, and the Minotaur charged them at full speed. Since they were 90 feet away, it was going to take at least 2 rounds for the Minotaur to get to the players. And the other 2 Minotaurs, his brothers, that were underneath the bridge, came out and started charging up the gorge, climbing it, to get to an area where they could see what was going on and help their brother out. And this is when the mojo happened. I knew that the players were going to down the first Minotaur before he ever even got near them. because I had lowered his hit points so much. So somehow, can't tell you if it's from experience or just a desire to have something different happen, I decided that the Minotaur's backstory was all tied together. That all three Minotaurs were brothers, that they came from a tribe in the mountains nearby and had been exiled by their father because they couldn't meet the standards that the other Minotaurs did. They were weaker and just not as tough as the Minotaur tribe needed them to be. So they ran away. They decided that they were going to strike out on their own, make a bunch of money, make fame and fortune, and then return to the tribe as heroes. This is what went on in my mind. And what happened next helped that out even more. Because the players, at least one of them, if I remember correctly, got a critical hit on their next shot and rolled almost max damage. The other player didn't get a critical hit, but did roll max damage. So this Minotaur went down in 2 rounds before he was ever able to engage the players. The other 2 Minotaurs are just now crawling up out of the gorge, seeing their brother laying there dead, or dying at least, because that's another kick. I decided that my monsters were also going to be allowed to roll death saving throws. So they had downed the Minotaur, but he was now making death saves. It was possible he could get back up. It was possible that he would die there. But when the other 2 Minotaurs came out, my players had finished their rounds. The Minotaurs spent their round crying out to the characters. "You've killed Artok! How could you? He was our brother! Oh, the gods! Oh, why? Ah! Oh, my brother, go to the fields of the dead. Find your victories there. Why have you done this?" the other Minotaur says as he looks at the players. "Why have you done this? He was our big brother. He protected us. And you have slain him for no reason. We were just gathering coin. Why would you do this?" So I had picked the name Artak because I looked down at one of my pieces of paper and saw the word attack and just formed it differently. And I instantly also jot down the names of the other 2, Grinnog and Mooger. I don't know where I came up with these names. There are lots of recommendations on how to bring up names for NPCs and many different videos all over the internet. You can have a list of them printed out, ready to go, or take a notebook and a pencil and jot down 30 or 40 names for you. Just sometimes if you end up with a whole bunch of people named Steve, Stevio, Stevia, it's not my fault. Just use your own intuition for how to come up with names and make it fun. The players will probably remember 5% of the characters that you name, but those 5% they are going to love more than their own party members. So now the players are talking about what they're going to do. They're kind of taken aback by this because both the other Minotaurs have now put down their weapons and ran to their brother who is making death saving throws. They're trying to figure out what they want to do amongst each other. And during this gap in time, the DM's mind is rolling. So I'm coming up with even more backstory for these 3 Minotaurs. After they had left the mountains, they wandered down and found this bridge. And they were having lunch on this bridge, just looking around at the scenery and enjoying not being surrounded by the people that were bullying them. And some travelers came by with a wagon and a couple carts, and they were terrified when they saw these Minotaurs. So they had walked out and given the Minotaurs money and asked for passage on the bridge. Well, this put an idea into their heads. And they've been at this bridge for about a week now, just gathering tolls from passerbys, just by chance. Not any evil method behind their madness. They were just taking advantage of a situation they had found. But now their brother lay dying. At this point, the players had decided, well, let's make friends with them, which caught me aback a little bit, but okay. And they heal the Minotaur that they've downed. And then they start having a conversation. While they're having this conversation with the Minotaurs, I am coming up with something that I didn't realize I was going to do. The players have helped shape the story of my world. They had just encountered creatures that would normally just be bloodthirsty monsters looking to kill any humanoid that they found, but instead, they're actually forming a type of friendship with these creatures. So in that moment, my homebrew world changed entirely. Almost all humanoid races at that point became not necessarily peaceful, but negotiable with. This is way before Tasha's Cauldron, so none of those rules were in effect or none of those changes. It was just something that my players did. So as a DM and using your players' mojo, let them shape parts of your world too. Because believe me, homebrewing a world or even just using Forgotten Realms, it can be overwhelming how much information there is. And if your players help create some of your world for you, well, that's even better because they're going to enjoy it and it's less work you have to do. And I know how hard this can be. Improv is not something that comes to everyone easily. It doesn't come to me easy at all sometimes. Creativity is something you have to work at. The more you DM, the more you play, the more you design, the more creative you will be. I think it was Mark Twain or some famous guy, I'm not going to quote him, said the more you practice something, the better you are at it. Like the more you write, the more of a writer you are. The more you play, the more of a player you are. The more you DM, the more of a DM you can be. So learning these skills takes time. Some people are just naturally attuned to it. Some people will never have it. And they need to have everything written down. And that's all right. Whatever kind of a DM you are, it's fine. Just learn to find the fun in every encounter. Well, maybe not every, but some of them, to provide interesting situations. Not every combat needs to be a combat slog that drags out for a full minute where you're trying to keep track of different spells to make sure they haven't run out yet. And not every combat needs to last just one round. Remember, your creatures, your monsters, your humanoids, your dragons, your giants, they all have their own motivations of why they're doing something. And as the DM, use your mojo to get that feeling, to get into that character's role. Are these Minotaurs really going to defend this bridge with their life for a few gold coins? Faced with the overwhelming force that the characters had shown, no, they would have ran, but they never got the chance. Take that into effect. Find unique things to make your players more interested in your world and more interested in an encounter. Interesting encounters will last in the minds of your players for a long time. When I told my players that I was coming up with this YouTube channel and kind of what I wanted to do with it, the two players that played this situation immediately brought that up. And I want you to think about that for a second. Players that have been playing the game for about 6 years remembered an encounter from 5 years ago with 3 Minotaurs on a bridge at the start of their campaign. It helped set the tone for that entire campaign. And just so you know, those 3 Minotaurs ended up outfitted in dragon scale armor with magical weapons and potions, and they became honored, respected throughout the land. Their loyalty was unwavering to the characters, and they helped to bring about a dormant god back to exalted status also. So through this YouTube channel, I'm trying to help everyone become a better DM and hopefully a better player. Everyone's got mojo and everyone needs to learn how to use it at the table. We can all make this a funner and more exciting game every week that we show up. And remember, the DM is there to have fun with the players also. The players, of course, are there to have fun, but remember that your DM should be having fun too. And we're all having fun together. It is a game. Let's enjoy it as a game and have a good time. And of course, please like and subscribe down below. I've never had to do that before, and this is my first video, so I'm hoping you spread this around to your friends if you like it. If you don't, tell me in the comments. Let me know what I can do better. I'm just learning. This is my first video, and I've got more equipment coming, But I want to do better. I want to do the right thing so you all can learn through actual experiences what happens in a DM's mind when things are changing. Because it can make or break an experience. And hopefully, through the things that I've done as a DM, you can get some hints for things that you could do, or give you some hints for ways you could change games you already have going. I'm hoping that the Dungeon Master's Mojo helps you all to have a better time and to be a better DM. So, again, like and subscribe down below, and see you next time.